Well, welcome back to The Fisherman, and here are my top 5 tips that I've learned so far to help me catch more perch on lures. After the last video, you probably thought, he's having a rough time, and I noticed that on the comments on my last video, where I sort of said, I'm not catching a lot of fish, a lot of you are in the same boat, and it seems to be a common theme across rivers, canals and stuff, that there's just not that many perch in areas where you've not maybe caught them in the past, or perhaps where they're just not feeding. There's maybe too much food still in the river, the river's still full of fry, that kind of thing. So it's been a tough few weeks. However, in the last session, managed to turn a corner, found some better fish, and actually caught some really nice fish. So things are on the up, and I think it's only going to get better from now. So that leads me on to tip 1, location. It's the most boring one in the world, but it's so important. And I learned this from my chub fishing, because what you've got to remember is, guys, I'm from a max fishing background, so max fishing is my #1 priority, and throughout the year I'm max fishing. So location's never a big deal, because other than finding the fish within your peg, there's not a lot you can do about it. You get the peg you're drawn, that's it. However, now last 2 years I've done a lot of chub fishing, and this year I'm doing a lot of perch fishing before I go into chub fishing, realising that it's just all about location. It's 99%, it's 4 parts of a 5-part jigsaw puzzle, I'm sure. So get yourself on Google Maps. I spoke about this before in a chub video, but get yourself on Google Maps, have a look at your river or canal or lake or whatever. But I'm fishing rivers, so I'm looking at obviously the bends in the rivers, looking for features on Google Maps, looking for deeper areas, because you can normally tell, if you look at the pictures are normally in the summer, so you can normally see where the reed beds are in the middle of the river, so obviously they're shallower spots. You can find the deeper areas, long straight bits tend to be deeper areas, and it's all about locating these areas. Now, one thing that I must say that I found straight away is that deep areas that run onto shallow areas seem to be really good spots. That's what I found so far this season. So anywhere where the river, especially if it's on a bend, but anywhere on a river where it's deep and then it comes up to go maybe to a weir or into some shallower, faster water has been really good for me. Whether the food is like gathering on that shelf or what, but that has been prime time spots. And I found 2 areas now that is happening, and I'm catching a lot of fish now. So location is everything. Tip 1, get on Google Maps, find yourself some really nice spots, and then it just narrows the search down. Where I'm fishing on the River Ouse, it's a long walk to any spot, so you've got to have a good idea, where you're heading for. Otherwise, you could just end up like walking for miles for no reason. So, tip 1 is location. Get yourself on Google Maps. Now, one thing I will say is, you can go to a spot that's got big perch in it, and you may just be there on the wrong day or the wrong time of day or the wrong conditions. So give each spot a few attempts before writing it off, because I've had it now where I've chucked in 1 cast and caught the biggest perch of the campaign so far, but then I've gone another time and not even had a bite in that spot. So the spot's right, it's just that the conditions on the second trip weren't. So just bear that in mind, and that leads me nicely, the perfect segue into tip 2, and that is conditions. Now, on your phone, get yourself some sort of barometer for the air pressure. Obviously, look at long-range forecasts so you can plan your trips. In my experience, and it's happened both times now, I've had loads of bites on stormy, wet, windy days. I've had lots of bites in them conditions, and I've caught my best fish in them conditions. So we've had some really turbulent weather recently, storms, high winds, very, very mild weather. And those times when I've actually been stood in the middle of the storm and I've caught my biggest fish. So there must be something in that, like the air pressure drops, and it's just perfect. So low air pressure is obviously good for big fish. It was the same when I'm chub fishing, and it's the same with perch fishing. So if it's low pressure, get yourself there. If it's high pressure, don't get there till 3 o'clock and fish later in the day. But to be honest with you, I'm learning more and more on them high pressure days, just stay at home or maybe go different style of fishing, because it can be as if there isn't a perch in the river on them kind of days. And obviously, if you've got the luxury of picking your little moments to go, choose the low pressure sessions, and you'll definitely reap the rewards. And it makes the location easier because you will get bites, and that is massive. If you go on a high pressure day and you're searching for your fish, walking up and down the river, but you're not getting any bites because the fish aren't feeding. Obviously it gives you a false impression of what's actually about. So look for the good days, the conditions, and that will play a massive part. Low pressure, massive tick, high pressure, massive X through the middle of it. Tip 3, keep it simple when it comes to lures. As you can see, bags and bags of lures, and I've got to be honest, I'm catching on the ones that I started with. Now I've tried all sorts, I've tried all manners of different pieces and different bits and bobs and different lures, and to be honest, I think I'm just going to leave most of them at home, because what I found, and it goes back to tip 1 and 2, if the fish are in the peg, you get bites, right? So you might as well use something you're confident in. Now, the best lure by a mile for me is a Real Ale Reggie. Now, I work at Preston Innovations. These are from Preston Innovations, but that is not the reason. Honestly, I can't catch on any other colour, bearing in mind, I can't catch on a Dark Lord or anything, but this Real Ale one, for some reason, whether it's the river that I'm fishing, the colour of the river that I'm fishing, the amount of crayfish in the river, but that little beauty there is a perch gatherer, let me tell you, it's amazing lure. So that, massive tick, love that lure, and that has pretty much made everything else redundant as far as Ned rig fishing is going. Like, I'm fishing them on, I'll talk about the rigs in a minute, but fishing them on a little cheb, and if there's perch in the area, I'll get bangs. Even if I don't catch the fish, I'll definitely get little taps and stuff on the lure. So that, for me, is #1 lure by a mile, and I've tried, trust me, as you can see, I've tried them all recently. That is the best lure for me by a mile. But there's a caveat to that. You do need a searching bait, and by that I mean something you can fish quickly, move around the river, walk around the river quite a bit and find some fish. And I was a bit stubborn to using shads, I must admit, because I've never caught a lot on them and I just had no confidence in them. However, I've started catching on shads now, probably using them better, and I've actually found the shads that I want to use. So the best ones I've found so far are these beauties. Craft Cannibals from Savage Gear. Now the only ones left in the shop were the bigger ones. I think these are 8 centimetres or 7.8 centimetres. Touch big for me, that, only because it attracts some unwanted attention from pike. Obviously I don't mind catching pike, but if I can avoid them, it's better. They're a bit annoying, aren't they, when you're trying to perch fish. The reason I like them so much, they've got a great action, they're a nice size, the 6 centimetre ones are a really nice size, but what I like is this thin tail that just bends away, it just collapses away, and I just think that that's a massive edge when you're trying to hit more bites. But the action's amazing, and I've caught so many fish on these recently that I've just got all the confidence in the world. So for me, I've got all these lures now. I think I need that one in either a chartreuse or a nice orange. They're the ones I've caught on, this colour, this chartreusey colour. That one, and then Reggie's, and I think I'm done. I really do. I've tried everything else, and I think at the moment, if I just took them 2 lures wherever I went, top stuff. Tip 4, and it's the rigs. Obviously, very, very simple. I use 0.6 braid on the reel, down to 0.20 fluorocarbon. To be honest, I think that could be 0.30. I don't think it actually makes a blind bit of difference, to be honest with you, especially on the river. I think they're hungry wild fish that have probably not been caught before, or certainly not been caught for a long time, and I just don't think they're looking at the tackle. So that's how I'm fishing 0.6 braid, because it's often really windy, so it makes a big difference to have a thin braid. And then I have probably 2 metres of 0.20, but like I say, I'm probably going to up that to 0.30 because you do get an odd bite off, which obviously we don't really want. For my shad fishing, I just use a simple jig head. There's a variety in here that I use, up to 7 grams seems to be about right with the weight of the lure and the rods that I've got. Perfect, so I like that. But the best rig for the Reggie I've found, and I'm sure it's no surprise to you, is a cheb rig. So the cheb rig, for those that don't know, is like a little lead or a tungsten ball on a big offset hook. Now the offset hook is really important, but what I think makes the cheb rig so good, I tie that on, I don't loop it on, I tie it on so I've got a fixed point, and then this, with a floating lure like the Reggie, pops up like a little hinge rig, like the carp anglers know about hinge stiff rigs. That little hinge there just gives them floating lures so much action, and obviously in 5 grams, 7 grams, nicely on the bottom, I tap it along the bottom, that pops up after the tap, and that's when you get your bites on the little paws. So tap, 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 Reggie goes up like that, stands up, you get your bite, brilliant. Now they're the Corum snapper ones, which I must admit, I've found them absolutely perfect. And at the minute, they're on sale in a lot of shops, so I shall be buying a lot of them. But yeah, that Cheb rig, for me, fishing it weedless, with one of them crayfish, is just a great setup. I can cast it anywhere, it's not getting snagged up all the time. It's a good presentation with that hinge. I think it's a really nice presentation. And I just think for crayfish and buoyant lures, I just think, why wouldn't you use that? I just don't see the point in using an open jig head with that kind of lure anymore. So I just use that. So tip 5 is all about the retrieve, and it's something that I've learned the hard way. Now, I wasn't really paying enough attention to this, and there's 2 things that have caught me like lots of fish recently. The first one is when I'm fishing my Reggie, and that's giving it some slack. So the way I'm chucking it upstream, which I think is really important. I'll explain why in a moment, but I'm getting downstream of where I want to fish, and I'm chucking it back upstream, which I think is really important. Letting it settle on a slack line, feeling it hit the bottom, or you'll see it hit the bottom, then tightening down to it, and then I leave it for a few seconds, and then I start the retrieve. So I'm like bumping it once or twice, no more than that. I do it along with a low rod, bump, 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 and then what I've been doing is bump, 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 and then leaving it tight, and often you get your bang, and then nothing else happens, and it's because perch hate resistance. So I'm bump, 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 bang, and nothing's materialising. Rob Wootton tipped me off on something. It was just in a chance conversation how he's been catching fish, about giving them some slack. And when I think about my chub fishing and any perch fishing I've done in the past, you've got to give them time on the bait. You know, you've got to give them time to take that bait and move off of it. So what I've been doing, and it worked an absolute charm on my most recent session, is chucking my crayfish in, letting it hit the bottom, getting in rounding down, getting into contact with it because I've got a decent sized cheb on a 5 gram, put the rod tip down, start the retrieve. So bump, bump, bump. And then as I'm letting it pause, I'm putting the rod back towards the lure and putting a load of slack into my setup. And you can see, because I've got a bright braid on, you can see it on the surface. Give it 2 or 3 seconds, bump, 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 put the rod back, bump, 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 put the rod back, take the slack up, bump, bump, and then you're getting this bow on the surface. And what happens is, when you're getting your bumps and your thuds, when the perch are hitting the bait, you're giving them that slack and they're just walloping it. And you can see the braid on the surface in the right day, go, and then you've got one. And it is deadly. If you get it right, it is deadly. And that has been a game changer for me. I was missing a lot of bites before, but when I realised about this giving them a bit of slack, and it's exactly the same with my chub fishing, exactly the same. When I realised that it's all about giving them that bit of slack, I've caught loads more fish. And then the final retrieve is about the shads, which, like I say, I had no confidence in whatsoever. But the shads, what I've been doing is I've been trying to do it with a reel. So keep my rod up and give it one wind, bring the shad up and then let it drop. Bring the shad up and then let it drop. But I must admit, I'm not, actually, it feels right, I'm in control, it feels right. But what I found best is getting in contact with the shad, bringing the rod up in a smooth, probably 2 foot, nice smooth lift like that. And so I can imagine the shad's going like that and then letting it drop on a slack line. Bring it up, let it drop on a slack line, feel the bottom. Bring it up, so I'm working the bottom 2 foot probably, in my head anyway. And that seems to me like the best retrieve for my shads. I've not caught anything just reeling them in, that just doesn't seem to be any good. And I've not caught anything like jigging the rod tip like quite fast. I just think that's a pike attractant, that. So yeah, that smooth up, let it drop, smooth up, let it drop. And to be honest, most of your bites that I found on my shads come on the drop anyway. So you chuck it in and you get your bite. As the lure hits the surface, they obviously hear the noise, see it coming, and they get it on the drop. So I think that's where the shads score, personally, on the drop. But obviously the retrieve is simulating that by lifting it up, letting it flutter down, lifting it up, letting it flutter down. So shads presented like that when the fish are up in the water. Reggies bumped along the bottom for when they're feeding on the bottom. And those tips hopefully will catch you loads more perch. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you again on the next episode of The Fisherman.